Have you ever watched someone get humiliated in public and thought, that's wrong, but nobody's going to stop it? I have. And this story is about what happens when the person being humiliated is the only one in the room who can save everyone else. Let me tell you about the day a 16-year-old girl in a borrowed coat walked into one of the most powerful law firms in downtown Toronto and left with every person in that building reconsidering everything thought they knew about worth, talent, and what it means to be qualified. Her name was Odalis Ferris, 16 years old, mixed race. Her mother Black Canadian, her father of Portuguese descent. 5'3", slender with natural hair pulled back in a loose bun that was already coming undone from the wind off Lake Ontario. She was wearing her late grandmother's wool coat, too big in the shoulders, slightly faded at the cuffs, and carrying a canvas tote bag with a small rip along the bottom seam. She looked, to anyone glancing up from their desk at Hargrove, Callaway and Associates, like a teenager who had wandered into the wrong building. She had not wandered into the wrong building, but we'll get to that. The senior partner at Hargrove Callaway was a man named Preston Wycliffe, 58 years old. White, silver-haired, the kind of tan you get from spending March in the Bahamas rather than shoveling your own driveway. He had practiced corporate litigation for 31 years and had never once lost a case he considered worth winning. His corner office on the 24th floor had a view of the CN Tower and a credenza lined with framed photos of himself shaking hands with people who also had framed photos of themselves shaking hands with people. He was, by every conventional measure, successful. Heaps. He was also, by every measure that actually matters, the kind of person who had long ago stopped listening to anyone he didn't immediately recognize as his equal. When his assistant Deborah told him that morning that a young person was here for the 10 o'clock, Preston had looked up from his laptop with the specific kind of mild irritation he reserved for things that inconvenienced him before his second coffee. Young person, he repeated. She says she has an appointment. With me, she says yes. Preston said nothing. He looked back at his screen. Send her to the boardroom, I'll be there in 10 minutes. What he meant was 20. He always made people wait. It was, in his view, a form of communication. The boardroom at Hargrove Callaway was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A mahogany table that seated 22. On the wall, an enormous abstract painting in charcoal and gold that had cost more than most people's cars. Odalis Ferris walked in, set her canvas tote on one of the leather chairs, and sat down. She did not look at the painting. She did not look at the view. She opened her tote, pulled out a worn spiral notebook, and read her own notes quietly until Preston arrived. He came in with two other people, Rutherford Ames, 39, the firm's lead contracts specialist, tall and broad-shouldered with wire-rim glasses and a skeptical mouth, and Josephine Trail, 44, head of the firm's arbitration division, who had the precise posture of someone who had learned long ago that her competence would never speak for itself and had decided to let her bearings speak instead. Both of them had been pulled into this meeting without much explanation, and both of them were looking at Odalis the way you look at something that doesn't quite make sense yet. Preston sat at the head of the table. He did not introduce himself. He looked at Odalis for a long moment, the coat, the notebook, the bag with the rip, and then he looked at Rutherford as if Rutherford might have an explanation. Rutherford did not have an explanation. So, Preston said, you're here about the Mercer file. Yes? Odalis said. Her voice was calm. Not nervous calm, not performing calm, just calm. The kind that comes from not needing the other person's approval to feel okay about yourself. And you're how old? 16. Preston smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who has already decided how a conversation is going to go and is simply waiting for the other person to catch up. Right. And who sent you? No one sent me, Odalis said. I requested this meeting. You requested. He stopped. Through whom? Through your office. 6 weeks ago. It took 3 follow-up emails and a registered letter, but someone eventually confirmed the appointment. Josephine Trail's eyes moved very slightly. Rutherford Ames pressed his lips together. Preston's smile did not waver, but something behind it shifted. And what exactly do you think you can offer us regarding the Mercer file? Odalise opened her notebook. She turned to a specific page. Not searching, not flipping. She knew exactly which page and set it flat on the table. Your client, Northgate Capital, is currently facing a $340 million arbitration claim from a consortium of pension funds in BC. The claim rests on a contractual clause that your legal team has been arguing is unenforceable under Ontario law. She paused. You've been arguing that for 11 months. Silence. You're losing, she said. Not because the argument is wrong. Because it's incomplete. Preston's smile finally, quietly, disappeared. Here is what Preston Wycliffe did not know that morning. He did not know that Odalise Ferris was the daughter of Ida Ferris, who had died of an undetected heart condition when Odalise was 9, leaving her in the care of her paternal grandmother in Scarborough. He did not know that the grandmother, a woman named Eula, who had emigrated from the Azores in 1974 with $32 and a dictionary, had raised Odalise in a 2-bedroom apartment above a Portuguese bakery, without a car, without savings, without much of anything except a profound and specific conviction that her granddaughter was going to be extraordinary. He did not know that Odalise had taught herself contract law out of a textbook she found at a value village when she was 13, that she had spent 2 years annotating case decisions on her phone, reading appellate judgments during her commute on the 54 Lawrence, cross-referencing legislation on nights when she was supposed to be sleeping, that she had, in the process, noticed something about the Mercer arbitration that no one at Hargrove Callaway had noticed, a precedent from a 2019 British Columbia Court of Appeal decision that had been quietly overlooked in the firm's research, because the clerk handling the file had misfiled it under a related but distinct legal category, and no one had gone back to check. Preston did not know any of this because he had not asked. He had seen a teenager in an oversized coat and made every decision he needed to make before she opened her mouth. What clause? Rutherford Ames said. He had said it before he meant to. It just came out. He was looking at Odalise's notebook, at the handwritten notation in the margins, at a case citation he recognized, and then one he didn't. Section 14 by, Odalise said. The exclusion clause, your argument treats it as a standalone provision. But there's a 2019 BCCA decision, Halloran v. Pacific Meridian Trust, where the court held that exclusion clauses of this type need to be read in conjunction with the implied covenant of good faith in commercial contracts. If you incorporate that reasoning into your submission, the whole structure of the pension fund's claim collapses. They can't argue enforceability in isolation. They lose the anchor. Rutherford Ames was already writing. He didn't seem to realize he was doing it. Josephine Trail had picked up Odalise's notebook and was reading the citation. Her expression was very still and very focused. Preston Wycliffe said, "That decision is from British Columbia. This is an Ontario matter." "The reasoning has been cited approvingly in Ontario," Odalise said, 3 times. Twice at Superior Court level, once at the Divisional Court. "I have the citations if you want them." "I'm sure you do," Preston said. His voice had a new quality now. Something careful and controlled, the way people sound when they're regrouping. "The issue is, we're not going to take legal strategy from a teenager." The room went very still. Rutherford stopped writing. Josephine set the notebook down slowly. Odalise looked at Preston. She did not look away. She did not flush. She did not do any of the things a person does when they're embarrassed or hurt. She just looked at him with the same steady attention she'd given her notebook. "That's your call," she said. "But you have a preliminary hearing in 19 days. Preston stood up. He straightened his jacket. "Thank you for coming in," he said, with the formal courtesy people use when they mean the opposite. "Deborah will see you out." He left the room. Rutherford Ames stayed. Josephine Trail stayed. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Josephine said quietly to Odalise, "Where did you find Halloran?" "The BCCA website," Odalise said. "It's publicly available." It's just, nobody had searched that specific combination of terms. Josephine was quiet again. She picked up her pen. What were the 3 Ontario citations? Odalis told her. Josephine wrote them down. Rutherford was already typing on his phone, pulling up the Canali database, his glasses slightly down his nose, his breathing shallow in the particular way of someone who has just realized something important. She's right, he said, to no one in particular. He was reading the decision. She's right about the structure. Josephine looked at Odalis. How long did it take you to find this? About 8 months, Odalis said. I started looking at the case in February. I found Halloran in March, but it took me a while to work out the connection. 8 months, Josephine repeated. I was also in school, Odalis said simply. For the first time since the meeting had begun, Josephine Trail did something that surprised even herself. She laughed. Not unkindly, not with mockery, but with the sudden, unguarded laughter of someone caught off balance by something genuinely unexpected. It was a good laugh. The kind that said, I see you. What happened next happened quickly, the way important things often do once the right person finally pays attention. Rutherford went to Preston's office. He did not knock. He walked in, set his notepad on Preston's desk with the case citations written out and said, We need to read this before we dismiss her. Preston looked at the pad. He looked at Rutherford. You're not seriously suggesting. I'm suggesting we have 19 days, Rutherford said. And she's right. Preston did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, Pull up Halloran. The next 48 hours at Hargrove Calloway were the closest thing to controlled chaos that Josephine Trail had seen in 8 years at the firm. The entire research team was redirected. 3 junior associates worked through the night cross-referencing the Ontario citations Odalis had provided. The firm's external counsel on the Northgate file was called, and then called again. By Thursday evening, the restructured legal argument was taking shape. Sharper, more precise, built on a foundation that should have been found 11 months ago and wasn't. Odalis was not in the building for any of this. She took the 54 Lawrence home to Scarborough. She helped her grandmother make salt cod fritters for dinner. She did her calculus homework and went to bed at 10. She did not know, not yet, what was happening 24 floors up in a glass tower downtown. But Preston Wycliffe knew, and for the first time in a very long time, Preston Wycliffe was sitting in his office at 11 o'clock at night, alone, with the specific discomfort of a man who has realized that his certainties were never as solid as he'd built his life on believing they were. He had looked at that girl. 16, oversized coat, canvas bag, and he had made a decision. A fast one, an automatic one. He had looked and decided in the span of 3 seconds that there was nothing there worth his time. And he had been wrong in a way that mattered. Not wrong the way you're wrong about which restaurant to try or which flight to book. Wrong in a way that said something about who he had become, about the gap between the man he thought he was and the man he had actually been in that boardroom. He sat with that for a long time. On the 19th day, Hargrove Calloway presented its restructured submission to the arbitration panel. The lead arbitrator, a retired judge named Marguerite Pelletier-Somme, read the new submission with the particular attention she reserved for arguments that surprised her. She had been presiding over commercial arbitrations for 12 years. She was not easily surprised. She asked 3 follow-up questions. The firm's counsel answered them. The pension fund consortium's legal team requested a recess. They came back 20 minutes later and asked to revisit the terms of a potential settlement. 2 weeks after that, Northgate Capital reached an agreement that closed the claim at approximately 40 cents on the dollar, saving the company roughly $200 million. Preston Wycliffe called Odalis Ferris on a Wednesday afternoon. She was in the library at her school, working on an essay about the Manitoba Act of 1870. She let it ring twice before she answered. Miss Ferris, Preston said, I owe you an apology. Okay, she said. He had prepared for this call. He had, in fact, written notes, 3 points he intended to make, a clear and measured acknowledgement of what had happened. What came out instead was something simpler and less controlled. I dismissed you, he said. I looked at you and I made a decision that had nothing to do with what you actually brought to that room. And I was wrong, professionally wrong, but also, he stopped, also just wrong, as a person. Odalise was quiet for a moment. Thank you for saying that, she said. She meant it. It was not a small thing to say it clearly without a but at the end. I'd like to discuss how the firm might support your education, Preston said. Formally. A bursary. An articling position when you're eligible. Whatever would be useful. I'd like that, Odalise said. Can I send you a proposal? There was a pause. You already have one drafted, Preston said. I drafted it in September, she said, when I first requested the meeting. Another pause, longer this time. Send it, Preston said. What I want you to understand, and this is the part I keep coming back to, is that Odalise Ferris never needed Preston Wycliffe's validation to know she was right. She already knew. She'd known for 8 months, sitting in her grandmother's kitchen with a borrowed textbook and a phone with a cracked screen, working through a legal argument that a room full of professionals with 6-figure salaries had missed. She didn't walk into that boardroom hoping they'd believe her. She walked in because it was the right thing to do and because someone had to do it. That's a kind of courage that doesn't always look like courage from the outside. It's quiet, it doesn't make a speech, it just shows up, opens a notebook, and tells the truth. Preston Wycliffe, to his credit, did not try to minimize what had happened or route the credit somewhere more convenient. He told Rutherford and Josephine, in a firm-wide meeting a month later, exactly where the breakthrough had come from. He said Odalise's name clearly. He said she was 16 years old. He said she had come to them and they had almost turned her away. There was a specific kind of silence in that room. Josephine Trail told me later that she had never seen Preston Wycliffe look uncomfortable before. She said it looked good on him, in the best possible way. Eula Ferris found out what had happened not from Odalise, who mentioned it briefly over dinner and then redirected the conversation to a documentary she'd been watching about deep-sea fish, but from a letter that arrived at their apartment above the bakery 3 weeks later. It was from Hargrove Calloway and Associates. Inside was a formal letter signed by Preston Wycliffe and a check. Eula read the letter twice. She held the check for a long time without saying anything. Then she went to Odalise's room and stood in the doorway. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Odalise looked up from her desk. Tell you what? What you did. Odalise shrugged, not dismissively, but genuinely. I just found something they missed, she said. That's all. Eula looked at her granddaughter for a long moment, this girl she had raised in 2 rooms above a bakery, who had grown up without the things most people consider basic, who had never once in her life seemed to feel that this made her less, and felt something she didn't quite have words for. Pride, yes, but more than that, something closer to awe. She put the letter on Odalise's desk and went back to the kitchen and sat down and cried for about 4 minutes. Not sad tears, the other kind. Odalise Ferris is in her 2nd year of undergraduate studies now, on a full academic scholarship at Osgood Hall Law School's pre-law stream at York University. She commutes from Scarborough. She still takes the 54 Lawrence. She still uses the Spiral notebook, a new one, same brand, bought in bulk from a dollar store near the apartment. She still has the oversized coat. She wears it every winter, right through until April, when the cold finally gives up the way cold in Toronto eventually does. She told someone once that it still smells faintly like her grandmother's kitchen, like salt cod and flour and the particular warmth of a small apartment where someone has always kept the lights on for you. She has never replaced it. I want to ask you something before you go. Think about the last time you dismissed someone quickly. Not cruelly, maybe, just quickly. Made a decision in 3 seconds based on what they looked like, how old they were, where they came from, what they were wearing. We all do it. I'm not here to make anyone feel like a villain. I just think about Preston Wycliffe at 11 o'clock at night, alone in his office, and how the most honest thing he said in that whole story wasn't the formal apology on the phone. It was those 3 words. I was wrong. That takes something. Especially when you've spent 31 years being right about everything. And I think about Odalys, 16 years old, getting on a bus home after that boardroom dismissed her, doing her calculus homework, going to sleep. Not defeated. Not crushed. Just continuing. Because she already knew what she was worth, and she didn't need a room full of people in expensive suits to confirm it. That's the story I keep coming back to. If this one landed for you, if it made you feel something, or think about something differently, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me about a time you were the one being underestimated, or the one doing the underestimating. I read every comment. If you're new here, welcome to Dell Stories. What we do here is tell the truth about people. All kinds of people. All kinds of moments. With as much honesty as we can manage. Like this video if it meant something to you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because there are more stories coming, and some of them are going to surprise you. See you next time.